Warning, the following podcast is brought to you by dads who still don't understand the rules of soccer. Welcome to the All Pro Dad Podcast.
Hey, welcome to the All Pro Dad Podcast. I'm Ted Lowe, dad of 4. Today I'm joined by dad of 2, Mr. BJ Foster.
Hi there.
And dad of 3, Bobby Lewis.
Hey, what's going on, Ted?
I'm glad to be with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Today we're going to talk about how to help our kids get along. And this one, all the episodes are important to me, but this one's really important to me on a couple of levels. One, this is one of mine and Nancy's biggest goals for our kids is we wanted them to grow up being kind to each other, having fun with each other, grow up to be really good friends. I feel like we've had success on that. We have 4 kids, and except for one exception, they're really good friends. And so I know what it's like to struggle with that, but that's been a very important goal for us. And I actually feel like we've had a few wins there. But if you think about it, statistically, sibling relationships are most likely the longest relationship of your life, right? These are the ones they're going to last the longest. They're so important. And I saw a study the other day, and it was talking about how we underestimate the power of sibling relationships have on who we turn out to be, right? And another reason this episode is super important to me is I've seen really up close a lot of where the sibling was the biggest bully living at someone's house, right? That what we can call horseplay is actually bullying and sometimes even abuse. And so we really have to think of that part of it. So those are kind of 2 extremes of that, but it's such an important topic for us to talk about today. I'm glad we're doing it.
You're right, Ted, in that research shows that more kids are bullied at home than anywhere else. In fact, and which can have long-lasting consequences. So a 2021 study on family dynamics links sibling bullying to a lower sense of competence, life satisfaction, and self-esteem in young adults. And earlier research found that being bullied by a sibling will double the risk of depression and self-harm in early adulthood. So we tend to not think of, rough stuff between, fights between siblings or insults as bullying, but that's precisely what it is, and it can have devastating results.
Yeah, I've got 3 kids and they're all different ages. There's a pretty decent gap between all of them. Their interests are all different. So when they're in their mode, when they're in their I want to do my thing mode, that can cause friction sometimes because they just don't get along. They don't do the same stuff. And no matter what it's like in your home, if your kids are just bickering now and again, or if you've seen it escalate to something more than that, or if they're kind of somewhere in between, this is going to happen at some point in your home. You've got to be ready for it as a dad, and we need to talk through some of the ways to do that in this episode, which brings us to our big question of the week, and it's this: how do I help my kids get along? And it's a big one because all dads have been here. You've all been frustrated. Your kids are fighting, they're pushing, they're shoving. One kid is saying something mean. There's lots of reasons why kids don't get along. And Ted, I know you've done some research on that.
Yeah, for sure. And some of it's going to seem like, notes from Captain Obvious, but I do think it's always important to pull back and go, okay, what are we dealing with? One of the main reasons kids don't get along is they want the same thing. They want the same toy. They want the same attention from mom and dad. I mean, you name it. The other thing is just this thing that we hear from kids all the time. They think something's not fair. How many times you heard your kid, especially when they're younger, well, even teenagers, right? It doesn't go away. Well, that's not fair. When one sees their sibling getting something that they're not getting. Also, there's just different personalities. You've got one kid that might be really quiet and you've got one that could be loud. And sometimes those can really complement each other. But a lot of times those differences can really make things so hard. Like my brother and I, very different still are in every way, personalities, interests, the whole bit. And our mom was always there to navigate there until she wasn't. When she passed away, we were 10 and he was 12. And those differences left home alone by themselves turned really, really ugly. So differences are a big deal. The other thing that can cause tension between siblings is that they're at different ages. A little kid wants very different things from a big kid.
Oh, yeah, that's me for sure. Right now, we got 5, 10, and 14. clearly the 5-year-old is not wanting to watch the same movie as the 14-year-old on family movie night. And so that's been one of the biggest, friction points in our home. Is just simple, what's supposed to be fun, family movie night. It turns into yelling and I don't want to watch Frozen 2 for the 700th time. And you're like, well, I don't want to watch this movie. And how come we don't get to watch Cars? And like, because we've watched it 7 million times. And so it's just like, oh gosh, now they're yelling at each other. We're supposed to have fun. It's like, the way we got around it was, all right, I know you guys aren't going to get along with this. We got to find some peace. We're just assigning it. This week it's you. Next week you pick. The week after that you pick. And it's kind of brought some harmony, but it didn't totally end the fighting. So I'm hopefully going to learn from you guys a little bit today, because
I would watch Cars. I would watch Cars. That's what I would choose. I love that movie.
I vote for Cars every time, but I don't win either.
For that. Yeah. Well, so this is where it's impacted my family, I think, the most. The whole thing of different siblings going through different phases. So I was very close with I've got 3 older sisters, and I'm the youngest. And the sister that was closest to me in age, we were very close growing up. We're about a year and a half, 2 years apart. And when she went from 8th grade into 9th grade, she was all of a sudden moving into a different phase of life. And here I am in the back, this, 6th, 7th grader. And she just didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore. I was no longer funny. I was annoying. I was like the little immature one. And my kids have experienced this. So my son is older. My daughter is about the same age, about a year and a half, 2 years younger. And it's hard for the younger sibling because there's rejection. But it's also hard for the older sibling because they're experiencing this whole new thing of life, and they want to go into that and not go back. And so there's this tension between those two. And I'll never forget, we were looking at old photos one night. This is when my son and my daughter were in the thick of this whole thing. And we were looking at pictures of the two of them playing when they were 4 and 5. And she said, well, that's when he liked me. Oh. And I was like, oh gosh. And, and she watches this podcast. So I guarantee you she's going to be like, he's still going through that phase, where he's mean to me. But yeah, there's just kind of this hard thing, and it's hard for the older kids and it's hard for the younger kids.
They do. They have different relationships. I would watch how our kids would get along at different stages. And our middle one, we always said he was good about playing up and playing down. But it became pretty devastating when he stopped playing down to his sister. Like he would, when he hit a certain age. So it's just tough, and it's communicating. BJ, what a great point to point out. Like, it can communicate rejection to our kids. And you think we do everything as dads, right, to make sure our kids aren't feeling rejected. And then there's somebody living in their house that's rejecting them all the time. And a lot of this, it's not abnormal. It's part of normal development, but we still got to be on top of it. Another reason I think that the sibling thing is not easy is our kids can struggle with getting along because they don't know how. They haven't learned to solve problems. They don't know how to work things out. It's a learned skill, but it's a little bit like boot camp when they're growing up. We can use those times when they're not getting along to help them learn how to get along.
Yeah, and I think every dad listening to this probably can, if they close their eyes, pinpoint a moment recently where like, oh yeah, there was a fight. It could have been this morning before you got in the car to go to work. There's constant bickering when you've got people living together, but especially little kids who, like you said, Ted, haven't quite learned how to, be a human yet. And so we're figuring that out. So the big question for us as dads is, how do we get them to get along? What can we do? What action steps can we put into place to get there to be a little more harmony between our kids? And I think the first step for that is to just be proactive. Model this when you're at home. Model how to act during difference and conflict.
And if you're a married dad, and you guys always know me working with married couples, I'm going to jump on the marriage train every time we get a chance. But this is why modeling a healthy marriage is so important. Your kids are seeing how you handle differences with with their mom, and how you are serving and celebrating your mom. And that's so key, what they're seeing adults do, because they're probably going to grow up to do it very much the same way that they saw us doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I've tried to do that very much in my home. You tend to bicker the most with the people that you love the most because you know them the most. Sure. You know them the best. And it seems so profound and so simple, but it's true. You can get on each other's nerves a little bit that way. So if you can model that in front of your kids, what a powerful thing that is. Another way to be proactive when you're trying to get your kids to get along is to celebrate your strengths. Everybody has talents and skills. Celebrate each other's strengths. Give compliments freely in your home. I think that's a great way to do it, because then you're thinking what's good about my sibling, not what I don't like about my sibling. And another great thing is make sure everyone gets me and dad time. And dad time is a big deal. I know in our home, my son, every day, he's like, hey, I get home from work. He's like, let's play. I'm like, play? I have my shoes on. So I'm carrying my laptop still. We can't play yet, but he wants to play. The amount of time may not be the same with every kid. The younger your kids are, the more time they probably are going to need. The older they are, maybe the less time they'll seek out to fill up that dad tank. But the requisite number of time, that whether that be 10 minutes, an hour, you need to give that to your kids, because you're then building them up as individuals. And when they go back, they'll be fulfilled. And hopefully that's, limiting the friction with their siblings. And then I love this one too. I think if you can talk about how to get along in a calm moment, that's going to go so much further than if you're doing it in the heat of the moment. I don't know if you've ever walked in on your kids, guys, when they're just going at it, they're yelling at each other, or they're angry. That's almost the last time you want to say, well, this is how you should show love to your sister. Like they're not in the right mind space for that. So constantly bringing up those things when they're calm. When they're not in the heat of the moment, that lesson will dig its heels in a little bit more and it'll stick.
Absolutely. You think about it, just even neurologically, when they're in the heat of the moment, their little brains are in the emotional part. Their logical part's checked out. And a lot of times when they're in the heat of the moment, so are we. So I think our logical part of our brains are checked out. And so it's waiting till later to talk about this, to talk about how you're getting along, to have those cool moments. You're calmer, you're cooler, and they can actually think a little bit better. Not that they have frontal lobes, but you can take a stab at it, right, BJ? Yeah.
Well, and you can particularly pointing out when you see behavior that's really good. Like that's when they treat each other well, or sharing stories of siblings who, maybe you and your siblings have worked things out, or you've done things. Like I'll never forget a couple of my mentors, these two brothers. I worked for both of them. And originally there were three brothers. It was the oldest, the middle, and the youngest. And they would both brothers would say that they were best friends with the youngest. The youngest just had one of those, he just had one of those ways about him. That was just, but they couldn't stand each other. And so they're both best friends with the younger brother. And they both just, this over and over again. Well, their younger brother died of cancer, when they were, he was in his 20s, late 20s, they were early 30s, I think. And the middle brother was telling me this story, and he said, my older brother, to his credit, came to me and said, what do I need to do for us to be best friends? And the middle brother told me, he said, I should have been saying the same. I should have been asking the same question. He's like, but I was so selfish. I said, learn how to play golf, because the older brother was not into sports at all or whatever. And he said, okay. And he went and learned how to play golf. And they have been golfing ever since. They've been neighbors for 50 years. They've been neighbors. They're in their 60s now, and raised their kids with one another, and they are best friends to this day. But it took intention, it took initiative, it took many years of working through things. But those are the types of stories. They would say what a blessing it's been for the two of them. And so sharing stories like that with our kids, like, hey, this is the vision of what could be.
Well, what a way to honor their brother too, right? Yeah. Which that's so powerful. And I probably talked about it on the podcast before, but our oldest two are best friends. Our two sons are our best friends. And when they were little, and this is still our text thread, it's called Triangolo. And it was the three of us, the three boys. And so we would do, cause our last name's Lowe. And so we would do things fun in a friendship. And our text thread still, when it's the boys to play golf or whatever, still Triangolo. But watching those two knuckleheads, together now, they live together 25 and 22, and they would rather be with each other than anybody. It hurts my feelings, actually, sometimes. Like they said something about playing golf this weekend, and I was with them. I was like, hey, like, I've got clubs. But at the same time, that relationship is going to be there for life. It's just so powerful. So I love that, BJ. Catching and doing something right, celebrate those.
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
Well, and your story too, BJ, reminds me of the next thing I was going to say, which is you got to be aware of how life events or different stages of life can affect siblings. I mean, some seasons are really hard for your kids, and they may act out a little bit just because they don't know what else to do.
Bobby, that's such a great point. It's one of the biggest examples where you see that, or we've seen that as a family, is we volunteer for an organization called Lighthouse Family Retreat, and they do retreats for families who are going through childhood cancer. And there's a lot of dynamics going on, but one of the things we hear over and over is just how hard it is. It's obviously hard for the kid who has cancer, no doubt about that. But it's also difficult for the sibling because they're the one that's okay, and the attention can go more, and rightly so, to their brother or sister who's sick. But then it's just really, really tough. And so there's just going to be, that's an extreme example, but there's seasons where we have to focus more on one kid than the other. And so it's just those times of being intentional to connect, to say, hey, talk to them about what's going on. They talk a lot about that, is to keep their kids informed of what's going on with your brother and sister. Here's why we're having to do this. But having that one-on-one time, making it just about them, right? And having those times to do that. Another thing we can do that I think that's proactive, and have you guys ever made family rules for how to treat each other at your house? Have you, either of you guys have that?
Didn't write them down. I think we have general rules like don't hit each other, that sort of stuff,
Yeah, for us, I think we had rules too, Bobby, that we would use, but I kind of love the idea of a family sitting down and going, okay, what's our family rules about how to treat each other? There's going to be no hitting and no hurting. That was really big for me. There's going to be nothing physical with each other. And no, we wrestled to the point, and I would hurt them. I could still hurt them. It's so awesome, and they know it. They're terrified. Every time I walk by them, they flinch. It's my favorite.
Still can't. You can still take them.
Oh, and for some reason, Dad's strong. There's just like something but I do keep feeling like I'm going to eventually hurt myself. But they do flinch every time I walk by them. They're like, oh, Dad, you're so mean. I'm not sure if that's good or not, but I love it. But just no hitting, no hurting unless it's from the parent. And no name calling. We would say that, like, no name calling. We said this a lot too. Hey, bud, use your words.
Oh, yeah.
And we do it. Whoa, listen. So to sit down and do those family rules, it's a big deal, especially when everyone's calm. You're not going to want to bust out the family rules right after there's been a squabble, because the rules could be really scary really quick.
So another action step that I think we need to do is get involved, because I think, like our kids, they get wrapped up in these cycles, and I think it's very hard for them to break out of these cycles. So we're going to have to intervene and kind of lead them. Like, if there's one thing we should be able to lead them in, it's how to have good relationships, how to resolve conflicts. So just getting involved, just is stopping what's going on. Whether it's they're in the car and it's, hey, I'm going to pull this car over, or something along those lines. I get very reactive when my kids are not getting along. Like when they're going after each other, I tend to be like, stop it,
and match that energy.
I match the energy. I come in. And so if you cannot be like me, And I've worked very hard on it. Like, how do I come in calmly? And I've succeeded maybe 4% of the time. Maybe I've been able to stop, but come in calmly. Just kind of, hey, let's stop for a minute and start asking them questions. Like, tell me what's going on. Tell me, there was a stand-up comedian I saw one time who was like, okay, we're having some feelings? Are we having something? And they're like, and so I think that's a great tactic. Taking a break. Hey, time out, time. Let's everybody take a breath. Everybody stop. Let's just breathe for a minute. To just get a chance to reset. And then asking them, hey, what's the problem? What's like one at a time? Okay, tell me. And inevitably the other one's going to be like, no, that's not. Yeah, this is what. And then it's like, okay, you're going to get a chance. But I want to hear from this without interruption. Just explain to me what's going on. Okay, tell me your feelings. Okay, now it's your turn. Like, a lot of this stuff is very hard work, and it's a lot harder to do that than stop it, go to your rooms. You know, like that will make the house quiet in 2 seconds, but your house is going to disrupt in 5 minutes after that. But if you walk them through this and kind of give them a turn to talk and share, then they see what you're modeling.
That's good.
And then eventually they'll start doing it themselves.
It's this fine line between stepping in and stepping out. When do I let them figure it out on their own? And when do I step out? Another action step that I think that, me, I'm going to beat the drum on this is we got to know when it's time to seek help. So when are those times? One, if you have a kid that's struggling with depression or anxiety and the sibling thing is making it work, you need to bring in another person to kind of help you do that. If you're feeling like, wow, we just keep going around and around as a family on this, whether that's a counselor, a pastor, a coach, a wise mentor, who's that couple down the road that may have done this, talking with them. And if it starts to have a negative impact on your marriage, I know people have, with their spouse, sometimes have very different ideas of how to handle conflict between the kids. So sometimes if it's impacting your marriage, that's a good time to bring someone in. And for sure, if there's even a potential or chance of physical abuse, you got to figure that out. That's got to be addressed. That can't be something figured out for a later day. But again, this is so important. Again, it's the longest relationship statistically that they're going to have in their life. So we need to help them do that.
I never thought about that before until you said it earlier. It's true. I mean, I'm going to know my brother for far longer than I know my wife. But I never thought about it. Yeah, you're going to know your siblings for a long time. It's true for your kids. And hope we can get along for all those years.
That's right. Well, you guys, this has been great. I love this. This is an important one. They're all important, but this is a big deal. This leads us to our pro move of the week, and that is to sit down with your kids and create a family rule or motto of how you plan to treat each other. I mean, that's just a good at Taco Bell conversation or at dinner to say, okay, how do we want to treat each other? What's important to you? What's important to our family? Because they may not know. Right? They may not know, and we can help them to know. Well, you guys, as always, thanks for hanging out with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, and listeners, we want to say thank you for hanging out with us. If this podcast has been helpful for you, can you take just 1 minute to rate and review it? That's how other dads find our shows. And if you have a question that you would like us to dive into, please leave those in the comments. We'd greatly appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. We know that you and your kids will be glad that you did.
Thanks again for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. Behind every episode is our amazing team. Producer Haley Mawat, audio and video editor Buck Buchanan, and production coordinator Corey Walliff. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. So remember, if you have more questions than answers, then you're probably in the right place. See you next time.